Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Business from the Bass Boat presented to you by Rec Lending. And guys, today we have a solo show talking a couple of things. But first, I wanted to make a comment just on what we've seen so far from a live fishing perspective. We had a show last week with Bailey and Andrew talking about the different things. This weekend, we kind of saw the final day of the Bassmaster Open on Lake Ouachita, where the beginning of the coverage, I just tuned in the morning and then I tuned in the afternoon. But the beginning of the coverage in the morning, it was guys really just forward facing sonar, right? Just you see your typical guys looking down at the bottom of their screen and making it fairly difficult to entertain, in my opinion, from that perspective. But then you saw later in the day, guys, the guy who ended up winning, uh, forgot that, should probably pull that up right now. Um, Local there to Ouachita, one throwing a trap, it looked like in the grass, which was awesome to see some of that happen. And then also shout out to that was Jeremiah Johnson Kindy won that open. Shout out to let's pull up the results here. We had Christian Ostrander from out west, absolute hammer on the Delta. He ended up finishing in, let's see, of course, it doesn't show my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th place in the Open. He was also looked like burning bank, fishing really shallow. So that was cool to see. I was glad to see some of that. But overall, it's kind of tough coverage to watch when it's some of that stuff. So no fault to the anglers, of course, and it's just kind of a tough situation I think we're in as an industry on what to do from an entertainment perspective. I think there's a lot to be said of that breakdown of what we were used to in growing up and watching fishing being compressed into a 1 to 2 hour show, all the action, a lot more stuff happening, whereas now stuff has gone to live, which has been great. It's been able to learn a lot more, but it's just hard to make it interesting when it's tough and guys aren't catching them, or it's guys looking at their screen, right? So, anyways, just my takeaway from the Bassmaster Open this week. That has it's been super fun to watch the Opens. I just feel like the race to the elites is something that I, as a fan, am super interested in, and glad to see a couple of buddies over there doing very, very well. So, anyways, what today's show is about is what I kind of stumbled upon in the off season as what quite possibly may be one of the best vehicles to buy for towing a bass boat. Very analytical when it comes to big purchases. Very analytical with like every purchase and a lot of different things, but with vehicles specifically, there's a lot of back and forth in what I was kind of going through. So I guess I'll start with I've had a 3.5 liter EcoBoost for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. It was a 2016 EcoBoost, and maybe it was longer than that. Maybe I've had it for 7 or 8 years. But, anyways, it was a great truck from a towing perspective when it ran for a half-ton truck. We're talking half-ton trucks here, which is a regular full-size truck, right? We're not talking about our 3/4 tons or our 1 tons getting into the diesel category, which I think are a great option. But I'm specifically talking about half-ton trucks in this video. But basically, that truck was great when it would work, and then there was just some issues that started happening past 100,000 miles, really, but especially once I got to that 130, 140 range, there just started to be some consistent issues with that motor. Turbo related, just there's a slew of issues on those EcoBoosts that can occur on the 3.5 liter EcoBoost. Again, when that motor ran, it was very impressive from a fuel economy standpoint, from a gas motor perspective. I would get unloaded on the highway. I could approach that 22 miles to the gallon range, something in there. 20 a lot in town, 17, 16 unloaded. When I'd put the boat on the back, I'd get 12 probably fairly consistently. I mean, if I'm doing 85 on the highway or 80, which is moving, then I might get 11 or something like that. But overall, it towed the boat well. I put a lot of miles towing on that truck. Probably 50,000 of those miles was towing at least. And so it was, that's a lot of wear and tear on a half ton truck. That's something else to consider with a tow rig when it comes to things is how often you are towing. So this time around, and the reason I bought a new truck was basically because that truck had left me stranded a couple of times, which is not cool, especially when you're on a boat ramp getting stranded. That also really sucks. Um, but anyways, started to have some major issues I'd spent a lot of money on repairs on that truck, but finally it was going to be very, very expensive to continue. And I just didn't have the trust in the vehicle I'm someone who has no problem running a vehicle into the 200,000 miles range, but I just had so many consistent issues with that truck that I just didn't feel like it was worth it to keep going with that platform. So unfortunately, bought a new truck, which is also like kind of a damper. It's great because you have a new truck, but it's also was a huge chunk of funds that I wasn't anticipating spending. And so, anyways, my whole debate on everything with this really came down to in the half ton category. It really came down to the um an older Tundra, Toyota Tundra. We're talking 2021 and back. So the V8 Tundras, which are well known, super reliable, plenty of friends with a lot of miles on them. They are not good on fuel economy, but gosh, they are reliable. And my thought process was to buy one of the last of that generation, right? 2020, 2021. Also, because of the incentive from Toyota when it comes to fishing, the Toyota series, and additionally, just a bunch of tournaments. Toyota, I can't say enough about how much they have poured into the bass fishing industry, right? And so that was a huge consideration. So I looked at those. Even though fuel economy was rough on them, they are super reliable. They can stack up a lot of miles towing, all that perspective. And if you have that within 5 years of the purchase, that's when it starts to kick in the dollars when it comes to tournament fishing and what Toyota has to offer from that perspective. So, and it's big money, right? I mean, we're talking if you're the only registered Toyota person in that event, um, and you finish 40th or something, as long as it fits in the categories, you're getting a $1,000, a $1,500 check, a lot more if it's in the elites, if it's in, the BPT, those higher level stuff. So they do a great job. So I can't say enough about that. I think that that's a huge thing when it comes to our sport as a whole is those contingency programs. I wish we saw more of that from more vehicle manufacturers too. Now, um, so I'm skittish. I was skittish and still am of the new motors in the Toyotas, the twin turbo V6s, very powerful motors. I went and drove some of those, and I think that they're a great motor. So that is 2022 through 2024, I guess now. So that gives you even more addition from the bonus bucks perspective. And there's a lot of guys running those trucks. But again, for me, my goal is to hold a vehicle into the 200,000 miles, and the twin turbos on all of these gas uh, half ton trucks. So they went from kind of the V8 models and being in non not very fuel efficient into all these twin turbos, which I experienced on the Ford, very powerful, ripped the boat around. I mean, that's coming from having a diesel um, uh, Cummins that I felt just as powerful pulling a small trailer like a bass boat with that F-150 as I did with a full-fledged 2,500 three-quarter ton diesel pickup. And that was impressive to me. But when those turbos start to have issues and all that kind of stuff past that 150,000 mile mark, it just turns into a very expensive, very quick, and unreliable. That's the other factor, right? It's like I go through a lot of landscapes that are the middle of nowhere. I can't have something that's going to die on me with things, and that concerned me about all these new vehicles. So, I guess moral of the story is it came down to one of the older Tundras for me because I'm nervous on all these new turbos, and There's already issues on every manufacturer that has a twin turbo half ton truck. Toyota, Dodge, Chevy, uh, Ford, all of them seem to have some cases of issues, and some guys have great luck with them. But again, my idea of holding a vehicle for that 200,000-mile plus range, it really came down to either one of those older Tundras, and I'm just going to eat the bullet when it comes to the fuel economy, but I'm getting something that's a little bit cheaper. It's not quite as new. Um, so I was really looking at anything between 2014 and 2021, right? From that perspective. Then the other one that caught my eye, and it really wasn't on my radar until I started doing some digging on it, were these new Chevy or GMC 3.0 liter Duramaxes. So it's a diesel engine in a half ton truck. And that uh, piqued my interest because there's been a couple manufacturers that have messed with those, right? So Dodge being one made the Eco Diesel, which some guys have had really good success with. Others they start to have major issues with. And then Ford, I think, made a Power Stroke for a couple of years in a F-150 as well. So they've tried this in a small diesel platform when it comes to diesel in a half ton. And so Chevy started doing this in, I want to say 20, I think 2020 is when their first one kind of came out. And then they did a refresh on the model in 2023, added a little more durability, a little more horsepower and torque to it. Um, but it is a 3-liter inline six diesel motor. And um, to me, it fills the gap for a lot of people who maybe don't need a 2,500, a 3/4 ton, or a 1-ton truck. They're not towing, a 15,000 pound camper. They're not towing a fifth wheel. They're not doing some additional heavy stuff, but maybe that 5,000-pound bass boat, is the perfect capable thing, or a trailer with another boat on it, or a trailer with ATVs on it, or whatever it may be, or a small camper, right? I mean, we're talking the capabilities of half ton trucks nowadays can tow 10,000 to 15,000 pounds in some applications. But generally, you don't want to like hit that max all the time, right? But anyways, this 3-liter motor to me, the play on it was the uh, how fuel efficient it was. Yes, you're paying diesel, so you're paying more, and you're having to pay for DEF on all these new vehicles, which DEF is a fluid to put into diesel trucks that basically burns off the excess exhaust. And I don't really understand it all, but it basically is an environmental regulation set by the United States. And a lot of guys end up deleting stuff or buying older trucks because it's a pain in the butt, it's expensive, and it over time can harm your motor. But anyways, this truck, you know, there's claims of it getting 30 miles a gallon. I mean, there's claims a lot higher than that, but it's rated, I think, at 28, 30 miles a gallon on the highway unloaded. 20, 22, 25 in town, something in there, and then towing a boat. So I don't really know. Um, so that truck is what I ended up going with. And that was for a couple of reasons. But number one, I was impressed with this idea of having a half ton diesel, and I drove one, and it felt very powerful. Um, for just having that difference between gas to a diesel motor, but the fuel economy is really why I went after it. I drive a lot for work, right? With ranch real estate stuff, just being on the highway, unloaded, and then a lot of miles towing a boat. And I don't have the need to tow anything crazy, right? So these trucks actually have a little bit of a lower tow rating than I had anticipated. If I do it over again, I wish I would have gotten with the max tow package. That they bump up I think up to 13,000 pounds, whereas mine is 9,000 pounds. It's plenty adequate. But anyways, we've got different rear differential gearings on those trucks. I think they added you can add tow mirrors, some additional features that would have been nice. At the end of the day, though, I also was only interested in trucks with a 6.5 foot bed, and the reason for that, to me, I think it makes it more stable platform going down the road. Towing, having that extra 1.5 foot of bed space is also huge to me because I sleep in the truck topper a lot. in tournament fishing season or hunting or anything else. And so having that 6.5 foot bed allows that super easy. Put a deck system in generally, and then a topper so I can have gear underneath, sleep in the back of the truck. It's like the setup for as far as for a cheap camping rig to me, it's hard to beat it. So, anyways, I went with one of these trucks. Basically, the idea was okay, these Toyotas are great, super reliable, and maybe I'll regret it. We'll see. I've got a 100,000 mile warranty though, so we've got some time. But anyways, I went with this for the fuel economy, and it has absolutely blown my expectations out of the water from that perspective. I legitimately, if it's a regular 70, 75 miles an hour, I can go and get 30 miles a gallon on the highway unloaded, 32, 33. If I'm towing the boat, I've done one couple 100 mile round trip now, towing the 21 foot Phoenix, dual axle trailer, 5,000 ish pounds, with a big Yamaha on the back. And so um, I have been super impressed with that. Now, I will say this wasn't highway driving 80, right? Like this was a winding highway mountain driving at 65, probably was the average of that entire trip. But I mean, I legitimately got 19 to 20 miles to the gallon pulling a bass boat, which was incredible. And the def usage is what everyone kind of is concerned about. Really wasn't that bad. I didn't burn through a bunch of def in that on that trip or really haven't in this truck in general. So been super impressed from a fuel economy standpoint with it pulling a bass boat. The truck seems a little narrower to me than the Ford did, and definitely narrower than the Toyota Tundra. The old Tundras really are really wide bodied. The 10-speed transmission in it has been fantastic pulling. I will say it does feel less powerful to me than the EcoBoost. Again, that EcoBoost, as far as like half ton, I think it's got the best in class, like 14,000 pound tow rating. It's got, I mean, 400 pounds of torque, and let me see here. Yeah, it's got 500 foot-pounds of torque, 400 horsepower. So it's just got some serious go behind it. And it's pretty dang impressive pulling a boat when everything works, right? Like I felt like I've never felt underpowered in a lot of vehicles, but that one you just felt so secure pulling it. You could go past somebody up a hill, steep grade, no problem, right? So um anyways, this truck to me, the diesel is very consistent with the 10 speed. It seems to shift more often. Maybe I'm just not used to that. The other truck had a 6 speed transmission. And so basically that was an interesting dynamic to me, kind of going up hills, the speed uh or just shifting more often, right? But to me, it felt more like towing with a V8. If you've towed with a regular naturally aspirated V8 motor for a long period of time, they're just consistent, right? They just run. They may have to hunt for a gear here and there, but they're working hard. It's just not, you don't have as much go because there's no turbo there. Like I felt like in the EcoBoost, those twin turbos really like you could pick up and go up a hill pulling something if you need to, but you were not, it was never not adequate, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's how I felt in this truck. I felt like this truck was a little more advanced than a regular V8 naturally aspirated half ton from that perspective, but it felt even it feels better than that, but not quite to the level of the EcoBoost, I guess is what I'm saying. So and that's, I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, you look at the torque specs on the EcoBoost being 500 foot-pounds and 400 horsepower, whereas on the 2023 and up Chevy 1500s or the GMC 1500s, it's only 305 horsepower and 500 foot-pounds of torque. So, um, plenty of torque there. I mean, it's a diesel motor, and it does the job just fine. And I think even that max tow package would do even better from that perspective. But um, the other reason I chose the truck was the diesel, just reliability on diesel motors, right? I mean, it's a straight six, which is kind of the mainstay of the Cummins motor and all these different diesel motors of that design, engine design of being a very long lasting motor. Time will tell, right? There hasn't been very many past 150,000 miles on these, so I'm interested to see, and certainly am happy to have my warranty with any issues. But so far, it's been a great truck. Got about 5,000 miles on it at this point, and I really think that it fills a need for a lot of guys in the bass fishing world. I think at the end of the day, if you can afford and want to have that additional 2,500 size, that 3/4 ton to 1 ton size truck, or maybe you pull horse trailers or a big camper, other things in addition, like, there's no doubt, like, that's gonna be even more adequate, better than everything else. Is it needed? In my opinion, not necessarily, but there is something to be said for just, again, less wear and tear on half-ton trucks. I plan on just, especially with the top, I don't have a topper yet, but that's the plan. The topper and the deck system, I keep a floor jack in the back. Like, my truck bed's fairly heavy all the time, which, A, is nice to have, in the snow. Um, I mean, I'm in 4 a lot of the time, but it's just not having weight in that back in the snow is helpful, or having that weight rather. All that stuff adds pretty significant weight to those springs. I noticed on the Ford, my springs started to get fairly saggy with the top or the deck system, all the tools in there, and pulling with a boat trailer on the back. That those rear shocks would definitely those rear springs were flexed pretty hard, and so um, I plan on doing probably some of that with this truck just to save have more rigidity in the rear when towing, especially with all that weight, extra weight in the back, being the topper and all that stuff. I mean, topper's 400 pounds, deck system with tools in it's probably another 200-300. So just consistently already, you've got a lot of weight. So um, that's my take on everything. Just wanted to say that it's been a great truck so far, and wanted to put it out there for people who are maybe in the market for a new vehicle. Just my take, the reason I went for that. Nothing against any other brands or anything else. Wanted to try this, and so far it's been great. And who's to say it may not change if got major issues. But as of now, I've been impressed with it. Diesel motor. I'm hoping to run it to 300,000 miles. Would love to get that out of it. Um, and yeah. So with that, folks, we've got some fantastic guests coming up. Stay tuned everything we've got going. It is also the first week of fantasy fishing over on the Serious Angler Show. We are doing our typical fantasy fishing shows for the Bassmaster Elite Series. Excited to get that rolling this upcoming week. I believe when this comes out, we'll be recording that night. So tune into all that stuff. Thanks again for staying with me. And hopefully you are getting out on the water here soon. It's February. And if you live in a place lucky enough to get out and fish in February, go do it. So with that, have a good one, folks.